Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I know it seems opposite, but I get excited about being able to come in and speak anytime that God gives me the opportunity to serve. So thank you for this opportunity this morning. I've been with you guys before. I couldn't remember how many years ago it had been. Tiffany and I were discussing that on the way over. But this is my first time to preach to you. I know I came before and I've led singing at one time in the past. I've been here many times through the youth devotionals, through the area wides. Daniel and I have been close friends for quite a number of years, maybe close to 20 years now. I'm thinking we've been close friends. We have served on the exposure board together for quite a number of years and been really close friends and you know, because of that, you get pulled into certain stuff, and not that I got pulled into this today, but Daniel has pulled me into other stuff before. So you think about first impressions, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning is first impressions. That's that popping you were talking about, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry. If we get too much of that, I'll swap over. We talk about first impressions this morning, and Jose, I may have to control it from here because the one I'm looking at now is the Spanish one. So I'm not going to be able to understand my own thing. So I may let you to, I'll just tell you to advance the slides and I'll look at it through mine because that would be quite interesting. That would be quite a first impression for you this morning. All right, let's just swap over. You can cut that one off and I'll just hold this one. That work? Is that better? Louder. So one of the first things that I think about with this church. Now, this was not my first time at this church that I was here, but one of the, I guess, lasting impressions that I had. Daniel sent a text message out to the youth ministers group. We all we would go eat together. About once a month, we still do that, and he sent a text out and said, "Hey guys, I need some help. I had these custom tables made, and I need help getting them into the church building." And I said, "Okay." So we got here, and then Daniel says, "Now I just measured, and these tables will not fit down our stairwell, so we're going to have to bring them up the back hill back here." Okay, for reference, these are these two wooden tables, these farm tables downstairs. And so we had to bring them up the hill back here. And they are a lot heavier than you realize, and especially bringing them up that hill. And one of the youth ministers overworked himself so much that he was standing back here about halfway up the hill, getting sick and getting sick in the grass as we were carrying these tables up this hill. And we got the tables up the hill and brought them in the back door, and we were all so exhausted. So that just ingrains in my memory, right, coming up here and seeing those tables at least, thinking about that. But in so many other ways, the first impressions of this church is what a loving group of people that you are. The first time that I came here and that we came and attended services here, you all wrapped your arms around me and my family, and you have such a beautiful building and just so many great first impressions of so many people that I've got to be friends with. Miss Gail and known her for years with Exposure, and so many others that you guys just have a wonderful congregation. So with that first impression, it's funny to think about one of my mentors, one of my heroes, Jerry Jenkins, always told me, he said, "Look, never preach the same sermon twice." I wonder how many calls he got on a Saturday night at whatever time it was that said, "Hey, do you mind preaching tomorrow morning?" and having to get a sermon ready. So I've got a sermon that I had prepared, and I redid it a little bit, so I did not preach the same sermon twice this morning, but it was about first impressions, and I thought that would be so good. It's my first time speaking to you guys and talking about first impressions with you guys, even though, and this ties into the sermon so well. You want to cut that off, Nimi? Oh, yeah, sorry. This ties into the sermon so well because even though it's a first impression, it's not really a first impression, right? Because I have been here before. And you'll get that in just a second. So why it's a, if you will, a second first impressions. There's a lot of things that we get first impressions from throughout life, right? What's some of the things that you may think about that you got that first impression of, that you're either, some of those things that you have that first impression of, it just has that wow factor, right? That just pulls you in and you're like, wow. Now that can go two ways, okay? That can go, wow, that's amazing, or wow, that's awful, right? I'll give you an example, okay? Because this is a hot topic in our house, just around everything. Again, I'm a tech nerd, so you got to think and understand that this is, I love this stuff. I geek out, if you will, at this stuff. The Tesla Cybertruck, right? You guys seen it? It's been out. He announced it a few years ago, but now it's officially available. He came out this week and said, you can buy it now. It's had its pre-orders, but they did a whole nother unveiling of it this past week. So you've probably seen it in the news a lot this week. It's one of those first impression things that the first time you see it, you're either like, that is so cool. That is awesome, right? That is just mind-blowing. Or, which I think it's pretty cool. Or like my wife, she's like, that is so ugly and so weird looking. Who would drive that, right? Everybody's going to stare at you. So you get that first impression thing, right? Understand that Elon built this because his son asked him, why does the future not look like the future? And that's kind of the theme of the truck. And so he wanted the future to look like his son saw in all the movies and cartoons and all that, and it looked like a future car. Nothing's changed forever. So he took that drastic change and changed that. We get other first impressions, right? This was really exciting for me. One of the things that I do is, if there's a movie or something that I'm really excited about, I do not go and watch any trailers for that movie. I want to see the whole movie and not know anything about that movie when I'm going. So the Star Wars movies, when they were coming out the past few years, I did not watch any trailers for. Okay? And then they talked about they were going to build Galaxy's Edge, and that's what you're seeing here, Galaxy's Edge in Disney World. I heard about it, and people were, the first couple of months, going and making these videos about it, and I purposely tried to not go watch anything because my wife surprised me for one of the birthdays, and with a trip down there right after they had first opened, a few months after they had first opened. So building up to that, I did not go and watch any of these videos or anything. So if I'm ruining this for you, I'm sorry if you haven't been there. But the first time that I walked into Galaxy's Edge, you talk about that, if you will, kid in a candy store, my mind was blown. I was giddy. I was so excited. I was like, this is awesome. I mean, that first impression was, wow, look at this. So what you're seeing here now, besides the Galaxy's Edge and walking through the Galaxy's Edge, which you feel like you're in a Star Wars movie, they made a life-size Millennium Falcon, and you get to walk through the Millennium Falcon. Is that a wow factor or what? I mean, for however many years, close to 40 years since Star Wars first came out, you have had people drooling over a moment like this. Are you telling me I get to go inside a Millennium Falcon? Wow, how awesome is that? I mean, it was so cool. Everybody's in character. You get to go inside, and then you get to drive, or fly, I guess, the Millennium Falcon with 6 other people. And you get your scores and everything. You go on this whole mission and everything. It's a wow factor. That first impression was amazing. When you think about just those wow factors of first impressions and moments like that where you may have been wowed in life, maybe you have some from wherever you went, right, the first time, right? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's somewhere like a Disney World. Maybe it's not somewhere like this, okay? Some of my other wow moments, as many times as you've seen a picture or a video or whatever of the Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls, until you see it in person, it's breathtaking. It's awe-inspiring. It's just, wow. No picture, no video, anything like that will ever give it justice. That first impression is amazing. You sit there, and at those places, not Star Wars, right? But those places of nature, you really just go, God, you are amazing. I mean, it almost takes your breath away seeing those things for the first time. We think about first impressions, and those are the things, at least, that come to my mind when we think about first impressions. When we look at making great impressions as a church, what do we think about? I'm going to skip that next slide, that next video, and go to the slide about the first impressions as a church. When you think about making a first impression as a church, right, a lot of times we want to automatically go to these things, right? And not that these things are not important. We have been studying a book by a close friend of mine, Dr. Drake Jenkins. It's called The Visitor's View. Drake went out and did all kinds of studies. He gathered research and all this about a visitor's view of the church, and why it is important to have nice things, if you will, and maybe not that you have to spend tons of money on this stuff, but what's important for a visitor's view of the church when you come into the church, right? And he's going to give you some statistics of that and things that sometimes we think that maybe, no, we don't need that or we shouldn't have that. And while some of those things are important, right? And some of those things for us to change as a church, and he gives those statistics, right? I know even things like projector screens, right? I came over and maybe helped just a little bit when a dear friend of mine, Dennis Washington, helped put these in for you guys at the church. But walking in the first time, you guys that were here, you probably walked in and go, whoa, wow, that's different, right? And it took some getting used to. But now that the visitors walk in, they see things like this and they're like, wow, you know, this is a church that's set in 2023. You know, they are preparing for a church of today just by little things like this. Making those first impressions are definitely important because it's eyesight, right? That's our first impression, is eyesight. When I was a manager for Best Buy for many, many years, back when Best Buy was cool, way back 20 years ago, and I loved working at Best Buy. And one of the things that we did as managers was we would visit each other's stores in the Birmingham area here. So, for instance, I was a manager at the Hoover store, the 280 store, and the Trussville store. And when I was a manager, let's just say I worked at the Trussville store, once a quarter I would come over to the 280 store, and my job was to walk in and to notice things that people may not notice that work there every day. Right? You get that. We do this at home, right? We do this at our jobs, right? So that box that somebody set over there that stayed there for a week, and now it's been 2 weeks and maybe a month or whatever, and nobody really noticed it's there because we're used to seeing it there because it's set there for so long, we're going to notice as a first-time person walking into that building, right? You know, that chipped paint or whatever that nobody's noticed for a while because it's just been there, any of those kind of things. The first time we walk into a place, we pay attention to those things visually, right? And so that's what we were supposed to do as a manager, was come in and see those things and point those things out, because when we get used to seeing those things and coming in, then those things do make a difference, right? And that's what we were supposed to point out. It can be true, the same thing about a church. Those things are important. Don't take those things for granted, okay? But don't get hung up on that. That's not what this sermon's about. You have a beautiful building. I don't know. I didn't come in trying to pick things out like that. The most important thing, and that's what this is getting to, is the way that people interact with you with that first impression. So, that being said, there are some things that you will notice visually, but your first impression with the people that you meet is what's the most important. Right? We get that. Take, for instance, out of Best Buy, okay, or any store. When you walk into that store, and you're going into that store, and you may notice some things like that, and it may be the same place, same thing with somewhere that you eat, your favorite place to eat somewhere. You walk in, and it could be, if you will, that hole-in-the-wall place, right? We all like those places. So we look over those little things here or there because those people are so nice, and they're so friendly, and they're so good at what they do that's why we go back to those places. We can identify with that, right? But let me ask you this now. Can we identify with that as a church? Can we say the same thing as a church? Those people are so nice and so loving. Wow. I want to go back to that church because of the love that I felt from that church. That's the first impressions that we must leave with people. Right? Okay, so that's easy to say. That kind of rolls off the tongue. We think about those first impressions. I don't want that to necessarily be the lesson that you're going to get, because what about in our lives every day? So more than the church here, that's what my lesson was about before. I was preaching to my own church, so I could step on toes a little bit, right? The lesson was more for in society. How are we the same? When we walk out these doors today, how are we the same with those first impressions? Do people see the love in us that they should see? Brother Kelvin did a great job in class this morning, and we talked about this exact thing. We put this on the board, and we talked through a lesson about how a lot of times the world sees us as Christians because they think that we see them as, hey, you're supposed to do these things, and you're supposed to live this way, and you're not doing those things, and you're not living this way, but you should. And that's what they see us as Christians first. That's their first impression of us. If they find out we're a Christian and they're not a Christian, they don't go to church, their first thought is they're already judging me because I don't live the way that they think that I should live, that they think that I should live. That's hard. That's not a great first impression. But we look at Jesus and we look at the Bible. And what was Jesus' first impression of people? The same thing we talked about in class. Every bit of it boils down to loving people and seeing souls in people. You see, Jesus didn't see people when he first saw it. He didn't see that woman at the well. He didn't see that woman that they'd cast out and ready to stone. He didn't see the person being lowered down from the roof. He didn't see so many others that came to him. He didn't see their sin first of all. That was not the first thing that he saw. He saw a soul that belonged to God. And he loved them and then wanted to help them with whatever it was. Man, that's the first impression that we want to leave. That's the first impression that we want people to have of us. We want them to know that we see a soul just as God does and that we love them, because that's the only way that we'll ever be able to make it to that area where we're able to teach them the truth in love, as it says in Matthew. Make a great first impression at your church. It's not about size or money. It's not about marketing or consumerism. It's about caring for people. And the same can be said about life outside of church. I want to read some scripture today, and we'll go through this, and it's in John 20, and then we're going to see, if you will, that second chance to make a first impression, right? Whoa, wait, that's not what it says. The Bible, the saying is what? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. One of the things that I love about the word never is that Jesus can take that word never and completely erase it, right? As he did so many times in his life. Leave it to Jesus to be the only one to be able to do things where people say, you can't do that. And Jesus says, watch me. Yes, I can. And we'll read right here together through this. So I'll start in verse 1, and we'll read through verse 20. So early on a Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. Can you imagine right here, just that first impression? When she first got to the tomb and saw that, what's going through her mind, right? Live this. Don't let this just be scripture. Don't let this just be a story that you've heard so many times and you know this. I've heard this a bunch of times. Live it. This is true. This is life. That's what I love about The Chosen. If any of you have seen The Chosen, it puts the Bible in real life, in someone's artistic view of it, of course, but it makes it real. This is real. This happened. Mary walked up one day and goes, just a shock. Can you imagine on her face? The tomb, what's going on? She has no idea at this point. She saw that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran down and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, all right? The other disciple. I think this is funny. We'll get into this in just a second. The Bible doesn't allude to this, but there's a couple things here. The one who Jesus loved. The author could have just said the other disciple, right? But he said the one whom Jesus loved. They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. Can you imagine her just hysterically saying this? She's panicking, right? Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first, right? So this other disciple that the Bible says Jesus loved and outran the other one. I mean, come on, who's the author here? This is John kind of humbly saying, look, it's me. I outran him. Jesus loved me. All that. I thought that was kind of funny there. And so they outran. They both ran. He outran him to the tomb. Stopped and looked and saw the linen wrappings were there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings were lying there, while the cloth that covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For until this time they still had not understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. And they went home. Wow. All right, let's just stop right here just for a second. We could read through this. We know this story. It's just a story. Yeah, they're there. Walk in. Lens are there. Oh, now they believe. No. Can you imagine them? Can you imagine just the heart-pricking, just wow factor? This is what Jesus was talking about. I mean, you could imagine them falling on the floor. He rose from the grave. Up to this point, they didn't understand it. What a wow factor. What a wow moment in the Bible. Take it as that. Read it like that. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she stooped and looked in. She saw the two white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other sitting at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been laying. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" the angels asked her. "Because they have taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they have put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she did not recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her. "Who are you looking for?" She thought it was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go get him." Just imagine at this point the distraught again with her. How heartbroken she is. Okay? Not just at this moment, but building up to this. Her Savior, her leader, the person that she's followed for years, everything that she's dedicated her life to is gone. You can just imagine in the mental capacity of her. She's questioning probably everything. What? Why? Right? We talked about it this morning. Sometimes we don't understand. We ask that question, why? Why is this happening in my life? Why is this happening? You're asking God, what is going on? You don't get that right here if you don't look into that. Mary has got to be saying that. Why? And she's pleading anything she can reach out to. Sir, if you've taken him, please. This was my friend. This was my Lord and Savior. I don't really understand why and what's going on, but I know this was my friend. I know how important this person was. And you can just imagine she's so distraught, so upset, that she doesn't even see him in front of her. So now this moment. Mary, Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, Rabboni, which is Hebrew for teacher. Can you imagine that moment? Another just wow moment. Maybe you've never seen this in the scripture. Maybe you've read it and heard it 1,000 times. But think about that wow moment with Mary standing there. Her whole world's been turned upside down. She has no idea what is going on, what God's plan is. Have you been there? Have you been there? Right? God, what's going on? I don't understand. Please tell me. Right? You're distraught. You're down on your hands and knees crying. You're not even focusing on anything or anybody around you because life seems like it should not happen like this. And God is sitting back the whole time smiling, going, I got this. I love you. My plan is a plan for good. It's a plan for you. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. Right? And we don't hear him, and we don't see it sometimes. And then all of a sudden, just like Jesus did with Mary right here, God shows up. God shows up. And we cry out, Teacher. We cry out because he's there in front of us the whole time. And then we see his plan. Don't cling to me, Jesus said, for I haven't ascended to the Father, but go find my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. I love this, right? Because God shows up, we get to see a glimpse of his plan. And what does he do? He tells us, hey, go work, go serve, right? Now that you see me, now that you see my plan, now that you get it, now that you understand that I rose from the grave for you, go. Go tell. Go tell my brothers, right? Go tell my sisters. Go tell the world. It's the same thing in our life. When God shows up and Jesus shows up in our life, maybe not the first time. We've known Jesus. We know who Jesus is. We've had that first impression of him. Maybe it's that second impression. What? No, that's never. You never get a second chance to give a first impression. Guess what? Jesus does. Jesus doesn't live by the word never. No, nobody ever dies and comes back. Guess what? Jesus does. Jesus comes back. Jesus has a chance to make a second impression. That's the power of God. That's the power that Jesus has right here. That's what he says. Go and tell them. All right, so let's keep reading. Mary Magdalene found the disciples and told them, I have seen the Lord. Then she gave them this message. Jesus appears to the disciples. That Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. Peace be with you, he said. As he spoke, he showed them the wounds in his hands and on his side. They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. And again he said, Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you. Jesus gets a second chance to make a first impression. And what does he do? What does he say? What's the first thing that happens that Jesus says to them? Right? That's important. Again, think about this moment. All the disciples, the apostles, they have no idea what's going on. Their world's been turned upside down. Everything that they've worked for, everything that they've given up, their lives completely have been shattered, if you will. And Jesus shows up again. So now, wow, he walks in, he's there. Can you imagine the eyes that are on him, the emotion going through everything? What does the teacher say? What does the Lord say? Peace be with you. Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I'm sending you. Jesus leaves them with a second first impression with two things. One, he wants to give them peace. And two, he wants to send them out. And he leaves you with the exact same thing. God's first impression are peace. Christ's first impression are peace and forgiveness. Pretty powerful stuff, right? From a guy that had just been beaten, crucified, dead, and buried. Guess what? That never word, God erases for us too. Just when we think God will never accept me, I've done too many things, my life has been backwards, there's no way because of the way that I've lived that God will accept me. There's no way. Never would God accept someone like me. God takes that word and just stamps it out. It says, I overcome never. And I want to give you two things in life. No matter what you've been through, no matter how distraught you've been, no matter, just like the disciples, how you think your world's been turned upside down and everything in your life just doesn't seem like it's adding up, and you've been questioning God, why is this happening? I just don't understand. Jesus shows up and he says, nope, I'm here to show you that I have a plan for you. And that plan is to give you peace. Peace be with you. And that plan is for you to spread my word to others and to see souls in them like I see in them. And lead them to me so that we can all one day live with him in heaven. What an amazing second first impression. You may be sitting here and you may say, look, I've lived my life. I'm this old. You may be sitting here and say, look, I've known people for years. They're not going to listen to me. I've sat here and I've been mean to people and I shouldn't have. And you may think, God can't use me at this point. Look at the Bible and look at a story that we've read so many times and maybe not taken into context, the emotion, all the backstory, all the things that have happened to the apostles and to Mary and all of his followers and how heartbroken they are. And for God to show up and say, look, just like them in the Bible, this story is to show you that I can use you no matter what you've been through, no matter what heartbreak you've been through, no matter why you don't understand. I want you to have peace and I want you to spread my word. You can do the same thing starting today. You can leave here a new person. You can leave here ready to have that first impression on people in your life that you can lead to God. Maybe this morning you're ready to start that by putting Christ on in baptism for the remission of sins, to be buried and to be raised a new person the way that only God can do. Where the world says never, God says yes, you can. Maybe you've been baptized and you've wondered what's going on. I don't understand. I've lived a good life, but I've struggled, and I'm at a point where I'm asking God, what's going on? Where am I at with my life? God, what's your plan for me? And you're ready to rededicate your life to God, to give back to God, to have peace in your life that only God can give, the peace that passes all understanding. Whatever your need for, maybe you just need prayers. We're here to love you as a church. I don't know you. I can tell you I love every one of you. I love you just for being here this morning. I love you because you're here because you believe that Jesus is Lord. Whatever your need is this morning, we want to love you. We want to help you. Please come as together we stand and as we sing.